The early morning Montana sunlight cast long shadows across Mark Thompson's meticulously maintained property. At 42, he had built everything from the ground up: a modest ranch house, a well-organized workshop, and a collection of outdoor equipment that represented years of careful saving and hard work. Among these treasures, his Arctic Cat ATV stood as more than just a machine. It was a symbol of his dedication and personal achievement. Mark had never been one to make big purchases on a whim. The ATV was a milestone purchased after 3 years of careful financial planning. He remembered the day he brought it home, how his calloused hands had traced the sleek lines of the vehicle, how he spent hours customizing it with additional storage racks and a reinforced suspension perfect for the rugged terrain of his family's generational ranch. Growing up, Mark had learned the value of hard work from his father and grandfather. They were men who believed that possessions were an extension of one's character, something to be respected, maintained, and protected. The ATV wasn't just a recreational vehicle. It was a tool that helped him manage the vast acreage of the family ranch, check fence lines, and assist with cattle management during roundup season. His extended family knew his rules about equipment. Ask first, respect always was the unspoken motto Mark lived by. Most family members understood and appreciated his straightforward approach. Most, but not all. Jessica, his cousin Robert's wife, had always been different. She came from a wealthy suburban background, entirely removed from the rural lifestyle Mark's family had cultivated for generations. Where Mark saw tools and equipment as investments to be carefully maintained, Jessica viewed everything as disposable, something to be used and discarded without a second thought. Mark had witnessed her behavior before. There was the time she borrowed her mother-in-law's china without permission for a dinner party, returning pieces chipped and unwashed. Another incident involved taking her sister-in-law's designer coat to a wine-tasting event, coming back with a prominent red wine stain that never fully came out. These weren't mere accidents. They were calculated acts of entitlement, a consistent pattern of disregard for others' possessions. The ranch community was small and news traveled fast. Mark had heard whispers, knowing that Jessica's reputation preceded her. Some family members would make excuses, laugh off her behavior as just her being spontaneous or free-spirited. But Mark saw it differently. Respect wasn't optional, it was fundamental. On this particular morning, the crisp Montana air carried a sense of impending change. Mark had no idea that today would be the day Jessica would finally push him beyond his considerable patience. His carefully maintained boundaries were about to be tested in a way he never anticipated. Little did Jessica know that beneath Mark's calm exterior was a man who understood the true meaning of ownership and was prepared to defend it with a meticulousness that would shock everyone in the family. The events of that Saturday morning unfolded with a predictability that would have been almost comical if not for the mounting anger rising in Mark's chest. He had been out since dawn, picking up supplies from the local farm depot, replacement parts for the irrigation system, feed supplements for the cattle, and a new set of work gloves to replace the ones worn thin from months of hard labor. When Mark pulled his dusty pickup into the ranch's main yard, something immediately felt off. The workshop door, which he always kept locked, stood slightly ajar. His stomach dropped as he noticed the empty space where his ATV had been meticulously parked just hours earlier. A series of rapid-fire text messages confirmed his worst suspicions. His cousin Robert's wife, Jessica, had been bragging on social media about taking a quick adventure on the trails. Her Instagram stories showed glimpses of the ATV navigating through dense pine forests, mud splashing up its sides, mud that Mark knew would wreak havoc on the vehicle's carefully maintained undercarriage. The photos were a stark testament to her complete disregard. Mark could see at a glance the reckless way she was handling the ATV. The suspension looked strained, the tires were cutting deeper tracks than necessary, and there were signs she had taken the vehicle far beyond the casual, quick spin she would later claim. When Jessica finally returned, her attitude was infuriatingly casual. She pulled up to the ranch, the ATV covered in mud, leaves tangled in its undercarriage, and several new scratches visible along its side. Mark stood silent, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Oh, hey Mark," she called out, stepping off the ATV with a cavalier grin. "I hope you don't mind. I just couldn't resist taking her out. The trails were calling my name." Her words hung in the air, a perfect demonstration of the entitlement Mark had long tolerated. Mind? The ATV was not some casual toy to be borrowed on a whim. It was a precision piece of equipment that cost more than Jessica's monthly shopping budget, a tool Mark relied on for ranch work. As she approached, Mark noticed something else that sent his blood pressure rising. The fuel gauge, which he always kept topped off, was now hovering just above empty. Not only had she taken the ATV without permission, but she had also nearly drained its tank. "Did you even ask?" Mark's voice was dangerously calm, a tone his family knew meant he was beyond mere anger. Jessica's smile faltered. "Come on, Mark. We're family. I didn't think I needed to ask for something so minor. Minor." The word echoed in Mark's mind. This wasn't minor. This was a complete violation of trust, of basic respect, and it wasn't the first time. Mark remembered all the previous incidents: the borrowed items returned damaged, the casual disregard for others' property, the consistent pattern of entitlement. In that moment, something inside Mark shifted. He had tried being diplomatic before. He had tried talking, reasoning, setting boundaries. Nothing had worked. Jessica continued to treat family possessions like her personal playground, with no consequences. This time would be different. This time, she would learn a lesson about respect. Mark's mind was made up. He would take action, a response so unexpected that it would force everyone to pay attention. Mark's patience wasn't merely a recent development, but a carefully cultivated approach to life he had learned through years of challenging experiences. Growing up on the ranch, he had witnessed countless family disputes, understanding early on that maintaining relationships often required strategic restraint. Yet there was a line, a clear, unmistakable boundary that once crossed demanded decisive action. Jessica's history of disrespect ran deeper than most family members cared to acknowledge. 5 years earlier, she had borrowed Mark's brother Tom's vintage truck for a weekend camping trip. What should have been a simple journey turned into a nightmare when Tom discovered the truck returned with a blown transmission and nearly $3,000 in repair costs. Jessica's response then had been typical: a half-hearted apology and an expectation that the family would simply absorb the expense. Then there was the incident with his Aunt Margaret's family heirloom quilt. Jessica had used the delicate, hand-stitched piece as a picnic blanket during a family reunion, returning it stained with grass, wine, and food. When confronted, she had laughed it off, suggesting the quilt was just sitting in a closet anyway, and that Margaret should be grateful it was being used. Mark remembered the family discussions that followed these incidents. His parents and older relatives would exchange knowing glances, muttering about young people these days and lack of respect. But no one ever took concrete action. No one ever truly held Jessica accountable. The ATV incident was different. This wasn't just about a borrowed item or potential damage. This was about fundamental respect, a concept Mark had been raised to hold sacred. His father, a man of few words but immense integrity, had always taught him that your word and your possessions were extensions of your character. A man's tools are his livelihood, his father would say. Respect them, and you respect the man. The ATV wasn't just a recreational vehicle. It was an essential tool for ranch management, used to check fence lines, move equipment, and assist with cattle herding. Each scratch, each unnecessary mile, each drop of fuel was more than just a material loss. It was a direct assault on Mark's livelihood and professional capabilities. What made this incident particularly infuriating was Jessica's consistent pattern of weaponized ignorance. She wasn't unaware of the rules, she simply chose to ignore them, banking on her charm and the family's reluctance to create conflict. Her behavior was calculated, a form of passive aggression that relied on the family's desire to maintain peace. Mark thought about all the times he had seen her manipulate situations, the way she would play the victim if anyone dared to challenge her actions. The strategic tears, the dramatic speeches about being misunderstood or just trying to be spontaneous. Family members would quickly backpedal, afraid of being seen as confrontational. But Mark was done. This was more than just an ATV. This was about establishing a clear message. Actions have consequences. Respect is not optional. Boundaries are not suggestions. As he walked back to his workshop, methodically cleaning his hands and planning his next move, Mark felt a sense of calm determination. Jessica had pushed him to a breaking point, and she was about to learn that some people cannot be manipulated, cannot be intimidated, and will not stand idly by while their boundaries are repeatedly violated. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape the family's dynamics forever. The Sweetgrass County Sheriff's Office stood as a testament to small-town law enforcement, a modest building that had seen decades of local disputes, ranch conflicts, and rural challenges. Deputy Sheriff Mike Holloway had worked these parts for over 25 years, and he'd heard his fair share of complicated family disputes. But Mark Thompson's case was different. Mark arrived precisely at 10:15 a.m., his folder of documentation meticulously organized. He had brought everything: the original purchase receipt, maintenance records, serial number documentation, and even photographs documenting the ATV's condition before Jessica's unauthorized use. Each document was carefully preserved in protective plastic sleeves, a testament to Mark's systematic approach to record keeping. "I'd like to file a stolen vehicle report," Mark stated calmly to the front desk deputy, his voice steady and controlled. Deputy Sandra Rodriguez, who had known Mark's family for years, raised an eyebrow. "Stolen? But isn't this a family situation?" Mark laid out his documentation systematically. "This isn't about a family disagreement. This is about theft and unauthorized use of private property." He proceeded to detail Jessica's pattern of behavior, the lack of permission, and the potential damage to his vehicle. What made the report unusual was Mark's comprehensive approach. He wasn't just filing a report, he was presenting a case. The maintenance records showed the ATV's value and the care he had invested. Photographs demonstrated the vehicle's pristine condition before Jessica's unauthorized use, and he had already obtained estimates for potential damage. Deputy Holloway reviewed the documentation, his experienced eyes scanning each document. "Mr. Thompson," he said after a careful review, "you realize this involves family, correct? This isn't a typical stolen vehicle report." "That's precisely why I'm filing it," Mark responded. "This isn't about revenge. This is about establishing clear boundaries and consequences." The deputies exchanged knowing glances. In rural communities, family dynamics were complex. They had seen countless situations where property disputes simmered beneath surface-level politeness. Mark's approach was unconventional but meticulously documented. As the report was processed, Mark explained the history. Jessica's previous incidents of borrowing items without permission, the consistent pattern of disregard for others' property, and the potential financial and practical implications of her actions. He wasn't seeking criminal charges. He was seeking official documentation of the unauthorized use. Deputy Rodriguez carefully typed the report, her fingers clicking methodically against the keyboard. She noted every detail, the make and model of the ATV, its exact condition before and after use, the lack of explicit permission, and the potential damages. "This will create waves," Deputy Holloway warned Mark. "Small communities like ours, a report like this, they'll be talked about." Mark's response was measured. Sometimes conversations need to happen. Sometimes people need to understand that actions have consequences. The report was filed officially at 11:37 a.m. It would be processed like any other stolen vehicle report, with one significant difference. This was a calculated move in a long-standing family dynamic, a line drawn in the proverbial sand. As Mark left the sheriff's office, he knew the next steps would be critical. The report was more than a piece of paper. It was a statement. A declaration that respect was not negotiable, that boundaries would be maintained, and that some lines, once crossed, cannot be simply walked back. The news spread through the Thompson family network with the speed of wildfire in the Montana summer. By late afternoon, Mark's phone was lighting up with a barrage of messages, each more incredulous than the last. His brother Tom was the first to call, his voice a mixture of disbelief and reluctant admiration. "You actually filed a police report?" Tom's laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension. "Against Jessica? Are you out of your mind?" Robert, Jessica's husband, was less amused. He arrived at Mark's ranch less than 2 hours after learning about the report, his pickup truck kicking up a cloud of dust as he pulled into the driveway. The screen door slammed with enough force to make the windows rattle. "What the hell, Mark?" Robert's face was a storm of emotions, anger, embarrassment, confusion. "A stolen vehicle report? Against my wife?" Mark remained calm, standing on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watching his brother-in-law's approach. "She took my ATV without permission. Damaged it. Ran the tank nearly empty. This isn't the first time she's done something like this." The family gathering that evening was nothing short of a powder keg. Held at the Thompson family's traditional meeting ground, a large barn that had seen generations of discussions, arguments, and reconciliations, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Mark's parents sat quietly, his mother's hands folded neatly in her lap, his father's weathered face unreadable. They had raised their children to be principled, to stand up for themselves, but this was unprecedented. Family matriarch grandmother Eleanor, typically the voice of reason, surprised everyone. "It's about time someone stood up to her," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Jessica arrived with a performance worthy of a dramatic television show. Tears streamed down her face, her voice trembling. "I can't believe Mark would do this to me. It was just a simple ride. We're family." But the family dynamics had shifted. Where once they might have rushed to comfort her, to smooth over the situation, there was now a palpable hesitation. Mark's meticulously documented report, the official police involvement, had changed the narrative. His cousin Margaret, who had previously suffered similar incidents with Jessica, spoke up. "How many times have we let this go? How many things have been borrowed and never returned, or returned damaged?" The stories began to pour out. The designer jacket ruined at a wine tasting. The family truck with its transmission blown out. The antique quilt stained beyond repair. Each story was a brick in the wall of evidence Mark had been building. Robert found himself in an impossible position. He loved his wife, but the mounting evidence was difficult to ignore. The carefully documented report, the specific details of damage, the pattern of behavior, it was becoming clear that this was more than a simple misunderstanding. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Jessica whispered, her usual bravado stripped away. But the damage was done. The family was seeing her, truly seeing her, perhaps for the first time. Not as the charming, spontaneous relative they had indulged, but as someone who consistently disrespected boundaries and others' property. Mark sat quietly, watching the conversation unfold. This wasn't about vindication. This was about establishing a new standard of respect within the family. The barn, which had witnessed countless family moments, now stood as a silent witness to a profound transformation. The lines had been redrawn, and nothing would be the same again. The investigation triggered by Mark's police report was more comprehensive than anyone had anticipated. What began as a dispute over an unauthorized ATV ride quickly unraveled into a broader examination of Jessica's pattern of behavior that extended far beyond family boundaries. Local law enforcement, intrigued by the meticulously documented report, began to connect dots that had previously been overlooked. Deputy Sheriff Mike Holloway discovered that Jessica had a history of similar incidents outside her immediate family circle. A local boutique owner came forward, revealing that Jessica had borrowed several high-end clothing items for events, promising to return them and consistently failing to do so. The most revealing revelation came from Jessica's workplace. Her supervisor at the marketing firm where she worked provided documentation of multiple instances of questionable behavior. Expense reports showed repeated incidents of personal purchases charged to the company, client gifts that mysteriously disappeared, and collaborative project materials that went missing under her watch. Mark's cousin Robert found himself in an increasingly difficult position. The investigation was forcing him to confront a reality he had long chosen to ignore. Professional investigators from various spheres of Jessica's life began to paint a consistent picture, a pattern of entitlement that went far beyond family boundaries. Insurance records revealed another layer of complexity. Jessica had filed multiple claims for loss for damaged items, often providing incomplete or misleading information. What had seemed like isolated incidents were now forming a comprehensive pattern of systematic disregard for others' property and personal boundaries. The local community began to take notice. In a small town like theirs, reputation was everything. The Thompson family had always been respected, hardworking, principled, and community-minded. Jessica's behavior was casting a shadow that extended beyond her immediate family. Mark remained surprisingly calm throughout the process. He wasn't seeking vengeance, he was seeking accountability. Each revelation was documented, each conversation carefully noted. His approach was methodical, almost clinical in its precision. Professional contacts of Jessica began to come forward. A wedding planner shared stories of last-minute cancellations and unpaid bills. A local rental company detailed multiple instances of equipment returned damaged or not returned at all. The evidence was mounting, creating a portrait of a person who consistently viewed others' possessions as disposable. The most profound impact was on the family dynamic. Robert was forced to confront a painful truth. The wife he had defended for years was not the person he thought he knew. Family gatherings became tense, with hushed conversations and uncomfortable silences replacing the previous forced cheerfulness. Mark's parents watched the unfolding situation with a mixture of pride and sadness. They had raised their children to be principled, to stand up for what was right, but the cost of that principle was becoming increasingly clear. Family relationships were being fundamentally altered. As the investigation continued, it became evident that Mark's decision to file the police report was about more than just an ATV. It was a stand against a toxic pattern of behavior that had been tolerated for far too long. Each piece of evidence was a statement, a clear line drawn in the sand. The ripple effects were immediate and far-reaching. Jessica's professional reputation was in tatters. Her personal relationships were strained. The carefully constructed facade she had maintained for years was crumbling, revealing the true nature of her actions. Mark had never intended to become a catalyst for such a comprehensive exposure, but sometimes drawing a single line in the sand can reveal the entire landscape of truth. 6 months after the initial ATV incident, the Thompson family gathering looked dramatically different. The tension that had once defined their interactions had been replaced by a newfound sense of honesty and accountability. Mark sat at the large oak table in his parents' farmhouse, observing the subtle but significant changes that had rippled through their family dynamic. Jessica's journey of accountability began with mandatory counseling, a condition set by both her husband Robert and her extended family. The sessions were not just about addressing her pattern of boundary violations, but about understanding the root causes of her entitlement. She was required to make formal apologies to each family member she had wronged, a humbling process that forced her to confront the real impact of her actions. The ATV itself became a symbol of transformation. Mark had the vehicle professionally detailed and repaired, documenting every scratch and repair. The cost was to be covered entirely by Jessica, the financial consequence that went beyond mere monetary compensation. Each repair became a tangible reminder of the importance of respect and personal responsibility. Robert's perspective had undergone the most dramatic shift. Where he once defended Jessica reflexively, he now approached their relationship with a more critical eye. He had attended couples counseling, learning to establish healthy boundaries and recognize toxic behavioral patterns. Their marriage, while strained, was slowly rebuilding on a foundation of mutual respect and accountability. The professional consequences for Jessica were significant. Her marketing firm had placed her on a performance improvement plan, requiring her to take workshops on professional ethics and personal accountability. Some of her client relationships were permanently damaged, a stark reminder that actions have long-lasting repercussions. Mark's parents, Eleanor and Jack Thompson, viewed the entire situation with a mixture of pride and reflection. They had always taught their children the value of integrity, but never had they imagined such a comprehensive family reckoning. Eleanor would often comment that sometimes true love meant holding people accountable, not protecting them from consequences. The extended family began to acknowledge their role in enabling Jessica's behavior. Cousin Margaret, who had previously suffered similar boundary violations, started a support group for family members dealing with entitled relatives. What had begun as a single incident had become a catalyst for broader family growth. During the holiday gathering, a moment of profound understanding passed between Mark and Jessica. It wasn't a moment of complete forgiveness, but of mutual recognition. Jessica had begun to understand the true meaning of respect, that it wasn't something to be demanded, but earned through consistent, thoughtful actions. Mark's approach had never been about punishment. It was about establishing clear boundaries, creating accountability, and fostering genuine personal growth. The ATV incident had become a turning point not just for Jessica, but for the entire family's understanding of respect, ownership, and personal responsibility. As the evening wound down, Mark looked around the room. Whispered conversations had been replaced by open dialogue. The sideways glances had transformed into direct, honest communication. The family wasn't perfect, far from it, but they were more authentic than they had ever been. The ATV, now fully restored and sitting in Mark's workshop, stood as a silent testament to the power of standing up for oneself. It was more than just a vehicle. It was a symbol of transformation, of boundaries respected, and of a family finding its way back to true connection. Sometimes, Mark reflected, the most difficult conversations are the most necessary ones.